on really getting a career in the wine business, at least early on in life. I have a degree in political science. I did what I always wanted to do, and that's join the Peace Corps. And that's where things shifted for me, because I was in a program where they trained us in agriculture. And I was at Michigan State getting tropical agriculture training. Ended up in Zaire, which is now Congo, doing agriculture, farming, teaching, and working mostly with fruit crops. And I really found I loved growing fruit. So when I came back, it's pretty obvious. I love growing fruit. I love wine, so there we go. I found a couple jobs in Ohio, where I'm from, and found out I loved the work. And I decided, however, that Ohio wasn't the place where I wanted to set my roots, because the type of wine that most people wanted was not the type I wanted to make, meaning they wanted cheap and sweet. And so I said I have to go to one of the coasts, mainly because that's where my audience was. But already the West Coast seemed a little bit too established. And I wanted to, I guess in my Peace Corps spirit, I wanted to sort of go somewhere different. Hence the attraction to the East Coast, and eventually I found a job. About 20 miles down in the Shenandoah Valley was a place called Tri-Mountain Winery, an old Italian guy that had a vineyard already and wanted to, he needed somebody to make the wine and manage the vineyards, and that was me. And that's where I got started. It wasn't a real successful venture. It wasn't the best site, but it got me here. And that's one of the things I learned early on about site selection and how important that was. I was greatly influenced by Naked Mountain Vineyards. Back in the day, they were just getting started when I arrived in the state, and they had this amazing site where they never got frosted, that everything just did really well. And I realized that it's probably because of their elevation and being up in the mountains. So I started to focus my own search for land up in the mountains. And the main reason is to get good soil drainage, good air drainage, but also to be cooler. And for me, because I grew up drinking European wines, I liked vibrant acidity and more minerality rather than sort of fruit and alcohol. And so that's why I had this long list of criteria looking for land, but the main one was over 1,000 feet in elevation. So the higher you are, the cooler you are, the later the ripening under cool conditions, and that's exactly what's happened. Of course, with global warming now, everything seems to have shifted a little bit, but we're still in pretty good shape. So this, right where we're standing, is about 1,350 feet. We started 1,100 and go up to 1,400 feet. And this is the top of the Blue Ridge. You see the trees in the distance? That is the top of the Blue Ridge. On the other side is Warren County, which is officially in the Shenandoah Valley. This is Fauquier County, which is officially in the Piedmont. This land has done what I wanted it to do, but you got to remember, back in the 80s, we were looking more at climate was everything, microclimate, thermal air inversions. That's what we were focused on. And soil was something that we knew it needed to be well drained, but that's about as far as we understood. And I chose this site based mostly on climate, and knowing that because of the role of the land, we had drainage. But now, 30 years forward, I'm understanding that, first of all, I'm lucky that we have a lot of different soils right on this piece of land. And I also realized that we didn't get it all right, meaning we didn't plant correctly matching soil to variety. And that's one of the big take-homes that I've learned over the last 10 years. And it's something that I'm changing my vineyard now. I'm actually ripping out a lot of vineyards and letting them fallow and replanting. So we've got this 5 and 10 year plan of reorganizing the entire vineyard. So a lot of my original plantings are no longer here. And it's not because they weren't doing well. They were, but they weren't producing the wine to the potential of the site. And in fact, only a few vineyards remain of my original vineyard, and this is one of them, the Chardonnay. This was planted in 1985, so that was our first year. And back in 85, this is what we knew best. This was considered close row spacing. It's 9 foot. We because we all had standard tractors. Now to me, I look at this as a total waste of land, planting the rows so far apart. But at the same time, you can't plant old vines. And there is an advantage to having old vines if everything is the same, meaning that you've planted correctly on the right soils. But in most cases, I feel we're at a better advantage if we take out the old vines and replant correctly, and the wine will be better, even though they're younger vines.
Are you planting closer together now?
Yes. Well, actually, I'll take you over to our new Chardonnay planting and show you what's changed. The other thing is you'll see is this wire is up high. Now all our wires are down low where we start. The main reason is that we want to get more canopy. Like from right here, we're only looking at 3 to maximum 4 feet of canopy space. If we're down here, we're looking at 5 or even 6 feet of canopy space. So that you got more leaves, putting more energy into the same amount of clusters, the wine's going to be better. It's not so easy on your back, but it's better. We've gone through about half the vineyard now, doing something called shoot thinning. Does anybody address shoot thinning?
Okay. Yeah.
We went through and we work each block separately, and we go through and I tell everybody how many shoots to leave per average size vine. And when we prune, we leave these canes at different lengths depending on the vigor. The pruner will take a look at the amount of growth the previous year, you can see that before you prune, and then leave the cane length according to how much vigor there was last year. This was a vigorous vine right here. I think because of when we did the parking area, the soil got moved into here, and this little section is always very vigorous. So we left long canes, and when the shoot thinner comes, they know they're long canes to leave more shoots. Back through again because they will throw off more shoots. And then after flowering, which will happen in a couple weeks, we'll be able to determine how successful the flowering was. If it's weather like this for 4 or 5 days, it wouldn't be so successful. So if it's not successful, we might not need to thin anything because the clusters are very small. They didn't set a lot of fruit, but usually they don't have a problem setting fruit, so the clusters are going to be quite large, and we're going to have to go through and start dropping clusters, which it takes us about 2 days to do our 2 acres of Chardonnay, and that's like 6 of us going through and doing it. If we had a smaller clone, we wouldn't have to do that at all. So the new planting is a different clone. I do like this clone though. It's part of the Wente family of clones, which has the big advantage of maintaining lots of acidity, and that's what I love. So it's a high acid clone. And the new ones I'm planting, I'm hoping will be the same. These are also Wente clones, but they are Wente clones from of different sources. Wente, back in the 50s, they were growing a lot of Chardonnay, and they got lots of Chardonnay from different places. And I think they lost track of where they got it from. So it's all just called Wente clone, but they have a lot of different varieties. These are, in the research, they're smaller clusters, but hopefully they'll maintain the same quality. That's what I'm looking for.
Between the 80 and 90 and 100 centimeters, which one has been the best for you?
It's too early for me to say. You know, especially if you're in a new viticultural area, which we are, to make any proclamation after less than 10 years of growing something, I think you're fooling yourself. So that's why when people in Virginia start talking about, oh, this clone's better than that, I say, oh, come on, guys. How long have you been growing it? Well, 3 years. Have you got a crop out of it yet? So, you know, a lot of my clonal work and my spacing work started in about 2002. So it's been 10 years, and I'm still not comfortable proclaiming anything. But I do know that I like the clone spacing. I do know that I like the low wire.
How old are these ones?
These are just going into their 3rd or 4th leaf. So I can't remember now. They planted in 2010, so 3rd leaf. And this will be the first year of a crop. We took I left a few clusters on just to see what they would do. clusters were like last year, but not enough to make any evaluation. Yeah, so I've got great hopes for this. Unfortunately, after the first year, we were already losing vines to yellows. So my idea is to, originally this hillside would be really nice for more Chardonnay, but I've put it on hold. This hillside was in mostly Cabernet Sauvignon at my original planting, and there's too much clay there. This was in Cabernet Franc when I first started, and it made good wine but never great wine. I realized that it was planted in the wrong place. This hillside is much more appropriate for either Chardonnay or Merlot, but not for Cabernet Sauvignon or Cabernet Franc. So I've done my plantings differently now.
What do you do with the old vines when you take them out?
It's a pain. We take everything out, but you rip them out. We have rippers with tractors and break the roots and then cut them out, take them up to our burn pile and burn them. Yeah.
Now are these north-south?
Yeah, that's the other thing that I'm pretty adamant about, going as much north-south as you can. A lot of my rows are going east-west, and north-south is better.
Just seeing all these birds, you have a lot of bird pressure here?
Oh yeah. We used not to, but it's things have changed. We used to do no netting. In fact, we used to have almost no scare balloons or anything, and then each year it started getting worse and worse.
Huh.
Now these are barn swallows, and they don't eat grapes. They eat insects, and they're gone. They arrive in late April every year. They build their nest. They go through about 2 broods. They build their nest. That's a barn as far as they're concerned. And they leave just before harvest. So they don't do any damage, but we do have other birds that do.
So do you net everything?
We're getting to that point. For some reason, the hot spot is down lower where we were having a lot of problems. Started netting that, and then every year we net more and more and more. Most of the birds are early birds. Trunk diseases, and it produces quite well on this system. So what I'm doing is this block I'm leaving it the cordon pruned, meaning spur pruned. Everything else cane, the blocks around it, and over the years I'll be able to evaluate the difference. But this block is done very well. These are some of our steeper slopes. You can't see it so well, but it drops off precipitously over there. We can only use on this site a track tractor. We can't use a rubber tire tractor because it's too dangerous. And that's another investment I had to make in order to start doing the steeper slopes. We had to get all new equipment, and it's an expensive proposition.
What's your philosophy with the undergrowth? Because I noticed some look pretty clear and then some are going.
Usually I leave lots and lots of weeds growing. I like weeds. I like certain time of weeds, except for this year because it's been so dry. I started to say this isn't going to work, so I had to start herbiciding some of the weeds. And I'm doing that on a block-by-block basis. Now, we just got 1.5 inches of rain last night, so that takes some of the pressure off.
So really it's just to soak up the extra water from the...
Yeah, well, on a steeper slope, when I like to keep brush for erosion reasons. What I do is I use this is chickweed. It's my favorite weed. It comes out in the spring, and it grows very vigorously, very low to the ground. It mats the ground just about, and then it dies. This time of year it just dies, and that's it. We won't see it again until next March. In the meantime, it smothers out a lot of the other weeds, and it forms a nice almost mulch to it, which if you're in a dry year, that's kind of nice. So I always, and I do use herbicides. I just put a backpack on and touch up, but I always wait until the chickweed's gone to seed, so it reseeds itself, and then I'll hit any other weeds. Over here you can see this big grass that I had to kill. I left that last year to slow down the vines that I grafted, because if they grew too vigorous they could actually blow that out of their graft union. So the weeds, we don't do it for aesthetics, we do it for a reason, whether to leave them or not to leave them. The plants now are going into their major growth stage, where they need a lot of energy. They need energy to produce leaves, and soon they'll flower where they need a lot of energy. And if they're held back too much, they're going to get stressed. They're going to start seeing deficiency problems. So in the month of May and especially June, I keep things pretty cleared. We mow the grass a lot, let those vines go. But then once we get into July, I let the weeds go, I let the grass go. We're trying to slow the vines down, especially the reds. This is a shoot tip, and right now we want to see nice active shoot tips. See the tendril, it's reaching up above the tip. That shows it's strong and it's growing. Well, that's great. We need that this time of year, but if we start seeing this in July or certainly August, that's bad. I can taste green, thin, vegetal red wines if I see shoot tips like this in August. There's no way you're going to make a good wine. At veraison, when the grapes start turning color, you need these shoot tips to cease their growth, so that the vine's no longer producing leaves, but putting all its energy into the grapes themselves.
So the more growth that you have around it is going to keep that from happening?
Right, you're competing. Okay. There's a certain point where you're trying to choke those vines almost. And not choke them, but say, okay, stop, it's time. And some years they'll do it naturally, but in a wet year, maybe not. So that's when I use the weed growth as a way of managing water. In California, they talk about irrigation. They control the water. We talk about evacuation. We want to get rid of the water. So we use steep slopes and weeds are ways of doing that, because we can't turn off the water.
Right.
So it just depends. Every year is totally different, and that's what makes it interesting. That's what I like about it. My biggest fear is with the early start is that we'll have an early harvest. And it's very important that grapes ripen when the nights are cool and the days are warm, and you start getting diurnal shifts in temperatures. If you're harvesting in August when the nights are still muggy and all, the whites have no finesse, they have no aromatic complexity, they lose their acidity, they're just these uninteresting, flabby things. And the reds don't build up fine tannins and get good color intensity. So usually in an early year, because the reds are later, they're usually, here we harvest in October, the reds. And in an early year, we can still make some good reds. But the whites, we're at a disadvantage because they're ripening in August and early September before we start seeing those cool nights. And we have to make odd picking decisions where we don't, the acidity's falling too fast, but the phenolic and the flavor ripening isn't there. So, what's better, have a flabby wine or one that's not fully developed. And so we'd much rather have normal. Yeah.
What's the range of the diurnal shift under normal conditions?
Well, the diurnal shift in the sweet spot, and my sweet spot is when I think the ideal harvest conditions are essentially mid-September to mid-October. There we'll usually see days in the 70s, nights in the 50s or 40s, so 20 plus degrees. But then in August, a lot less than that. The nights can be 70 and the days in the 80s.
And under those normal conditions, how are you making picking decisions? What are the things that are driving your decision to pick today or tomorrow?
Picking decisions are complex because it's a moving target, and weather plays a big role. And you have to make it easy, divide it from whites to reds. Whites, to me, the foundation of white is acidity. So that's what I'm really focused on more than anything else. You have to look at everything, but it's all about acidity and the right kind of acidity. Again, I'm going to get technical here, but I figure this group can handle it.
That's right. That's why
the acidity. You measure acidity levels by pH and what we call TA, total acidity, or titratable acidity. But in fact, that's not telling you the whole story. A lot of it has to do with the ratio of malic acid and tartaric acid. Tartaric acid being the acid we're looking for. It's the best acid. and some vines hold their tartaric in certain conditions better than in other years. Malic acid is the hard acid, and it's not a very high quality acid. So if you don't break that up and you're just picking by numbers, you don't know what kind of quality. You know quantity, but you don't know quality. And so what we're looking for is that malic to drop down at a level hopefully below the tartaric significantly, but still maintain enough acidity. And that's when you get into leaf pulling earlier in the season to get some air circulation, but not to get too much sunlight, so the grapes heat up too much and you lose too much acidity. So what I'm looking for is what I call mineral acidity rather than green apple acidity. And to be honest with you, we do the numbers here, but to break down the acidities, we send it off to Tech. Virginia Tech, to get the malic to tartaric ratio. But that's where I start depending more on my palate than anything else. So we go out and pick 150 berries, we squeeze the juice out, we run our analysis, but then I taste the juice, and I'm tasting just for acidity. And there's a certain point, and I write down my comments and then check from the previous 3 days and see where it's going, and I wait for that green apple acidity sort of diminish, and usually that's when the mineral acidity comes, and that's the sweet spot. So that's whites. For reds, it's mostly about tannins, and it's doing tannin evaluation of all parts of the grapes, the seeds, the skins, and trying to get those tannins in where they're mature, they're not green, but not too overripe where they're starting to fall apart, because the tannins in the skins can just sort of disappear if you get it overripe, and then you're left with a wine without much structure. So we're really looking at, and for Merlot that's been a challenge, and we still haven't quite figured that out. For Cabernet it's easy, because you just let Cabernet go and pick it when it's sort of time. It's hard to describe, but it's obvious. But Merlot it happens fast, so you have to kind of be on your game. The interesting part about all this, back in the 80s, all we really cared about was sugar. And it was about getting enough sugar, and we were so proud, the bricks are 22, 23, this is great. Now our problem is sugar, too much sugar, and having too alcoholic wines. Our viticulture has gotten so good, our understanding of what site each variety goes on, and it's to the point now where one of our biggest problems is too high sugar. So that plays a role, especially with the whites. I'm waiting for this acidity. If the sugar's already 24, 25 bricks, knowing I'm going to have an alcohol over 14%, that's not going to make a balanced wine. So we've been actually increasing our yields with whites and doing less leaf pulling in order to try to keep the sugars down from spiking up too high. So, did that answer your question?
Certainly did, thank you.
Good, and I could go on and on for a lot longer than that, too. Any other questions?
Jim, I don't want to jump ahead. You may talk about it, but maybe compare and contrast this vineyard with, I guess it's Avenius. Do you have another one?
Yeah, we'll be tasting both Avenius and Hardscrabble examples. We have 3 vineyard sites. This is Hardscrabble, which is the principal vineyard. It's the estate vineyard, and it's also the largest vineyard. It's about 20 acres. Avenius Vineyard is named after Shari Avenius, who owns it and manages it, and she's also the manager of our winery operation. She's been here for over 20 years, and she bought a site just a mile up the ridge there. It's a really nice site that she had to clear it and planted it in '96. And there's a lot of similarities between Hardscrabble and Avenius, except for Avenius is a cooler site. So it pushes the limit on especially trying to ripen Cabernet. And recently we've taken some of the Cabernet out and replanted with Merlot.
Is it similar elevations as well?
It's similar elevation here. It's on the average it's slightly higher.
She's got a different rock makeup, right?
It's a different soil makeup, yeah. But in both cases the soils are diverse. Hardscrabble, they're very diverse. Avenius is somewhat diverse. She has a little bit more greenstone, which lends itself more to the whites and Merlot, whereas we have equal parts of greenstone and granite. Granite's the Cabernet soil.
Right.
If I see a certain rock, I plant Cabernet there. And then Boisseau is our third vineyard. That's 5 miles from here. It's in the Shenandoah Valley. It's a totally different set of circumstances. It's a much warmer site. It's lower elevation, has deeper soils. It's a very vigorous site, and it's been a challenge for me to understand. I've never worked with valley fruit before, so just trying to figure that out. We've made a lot of changes over the last 10 years. It's about a 10-year-old vineyard, and we've pulled out, I think, half the vineyard and replanted it already. But it makes more what I call hedonistic wines that show better when they're young, they're big, they're crowd pleasers, but it doesn't seem to have the longevity as the other two sites, which gets into the whole weather and soil thing.